the small jolts of stress that you get in a day, that's devastating for your health. Like, you know how like something happens and it scares you a bit. Like when someone, if you're in a store and someone sprints past you really close to you, it would jolt you like, oh man, what's happening?
Your heart goes up a little bit.
Right. So imagine a soldier, he's in traffic and then like he looks over and the person next to him is reaching for something. And it's like, like he's used to being in a Humvee. There's nothing around him. But like when someone moves too quickly, it's like, oh, that's okay. Something's happening. I have to know what's going on.
React.
But now you're in New York City's traffic. Now everybody's reaching for something.
I don't know why I was only thinking about like, for some reason I feature a lot. All Marines are cowboys.
They're all in Texas.
So if that Texas, they're like in the Midwest or something. They all go back to their farms. I'm awful. What is that mental picture?
I have no idea. It's spoken like a true Texan though.
So when all our boys come home and I'm not thinking they go back to New York. That's not their problem.
Well, obviously they're going back to Austin and Dallas. That's where all of the soldiers come from.
Welcome to polypsych.org. Almost there, just one more time. Welcome to polypsych.org.
Welcome to the show. This is the Polypsych Podcast. It's your host, Anthony Lindsay.
And Stephanie Moreno. Hello, Dr. Fleur.
Hi, we're here with...
good morning.
Good morning.
We're here with Dr. Richard LaFleur at the University of West Georgia. You're working on a large-scale study on reintegrating military personnel back into civilian life. What are some of the holes in the current approach to reintegration? And specifically, how does your research supplement the current approach to getting soldiers back into society?
That's a really good question. What are the holes? There are so many places we can take, where those holes may exist. But I think one place, especially that my research speaks to, is the absence of the voice of the soldier, the absence of the voice of the veteran. A lot of programs that are currently being used and that are implemented are based on, from the clinical perspective, and a lot of it is based on just simply PTSD. And I say simply PTSD. PTSD is a huge phenomenon. It's a major part of the reintegration process, given the experience of soldiers. But today, the term PTSD has been used to fund just that, PTSD. And when we look at what a soldier has to go through, the experiences that they had while they were either deployed in the hot zone, the combat zone, and we bring them back to a society that's very, very different, we don't really stop and listen to what they have to say. What was the experience like? It's all based on the numbers. It's all based on the clinical side of the reintegration process. But the power of the voice, the narrative, the stories, the experience, that's the part that's missing, I believe.
So I've heard of PTSD, and I think most people have like a surface level understanding of PTSD. But like, what are some of the problems that the soldiers face when they do come back home, like specifically? Okay.
So when we talk about PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, it's PTSD has this wide range of symptoms, right? We can go from depression to anxiety, to substance abuse, to flashbacks, to reoccurring dreams, to thoughts that are uncontrollable and intrusive thoughts. And that in itself lends itself to a huge dilemma that they are going through, the struggle that they're going through. But with PTSD, although it's a mental disorder that requires a diagnosis, some of the other things that they really experience, and this is where my work comes in, it's the notion of moral injury, which is very different from PTSD. There's no way to really define moral injury, because moral injury deals with my belief system. And when I do things or I have experienced things that are very contrary to what my moral belief is, there's really not a way to diagnose that other than to listen to my story. other than to listen to the experiences I have had. So to diagnose PTSD, yes, we can look at the clinical model, but moral injury, where I've done things, I have seen things that goes against who I am as a person, that's going to shake the very core of a person.
So I've heard of people having essentially a built-in mechanism where it's like they have a negative response to doing things to the extreme. Like if they see a dead body, there's a recoil, like a physical recoil. And to see that on a consistent basis can change a person. So I guess when it comes to moral injury in general, like what is the approach to fix that? Like I know you would speak to them one-on-one, but I mean, is cognitive behavioral therapy the way to go? Like what do you do?
I'm seeing like a kind of a conundrum with that, as in that like the soldiers have to follow orders, like, and I think one of the crux of the issue when you don't have a say in what you do on a moral stance, I mean, you're left with no options but to come home carrying the weight of what you've done, and the only solace I'm seeing that you may have is to say, I had to follow orders.
Yeah.
But how much solace is that really providing, Dr. LaFleur?
So you really the both scenarios that you just asked about, that is the complexity of moral injury. First of all, there are things I have seen, there are things I have done, and how do I go about reconciling those parts of my experience with my being, right? How do I take that experience and how do I align that experience with who I am as a person? That becomes the struggle because there is a transgression, there is a sin. I did something that I was taught all my life not to do. We've all grown up hearing, thou shalt not kill. To murder someone is wrong. In the face of war, to the other side of this, it becomes the mission. Right. It becomes what I was told to do. It becomes what I had to do. It becomes what I did so that I can protect the person standing next to me. So that in itself is the complexity and it is the dilemma of moral injury. So Jonathan Shea writes about this, and he really brings to light the dissonance that happens between the betrayal that happens between what I was told to do and what I had to do. But even in that betrayal, because I'm not quite sure if I should or if I understand why I'm doing it, I'm just doing it because I was told to do it. But when I come home, I'm left with that burden. I'm left to carry the weight of what I did, whether I believe it was right or wrong, whether I was told or not told to do it. Because when we talk about war, sometimes it's I have to either pull the trigger or I saw what I had to see as a result of the war. When I am sitting alone with my thoughts, it's just me and my thoughts. You're not there to help me get through those thoughts. So you asked the question, so how do we deal with moral injury? Well, honestly, Anthony, thus far, I feel like moral injury is really a spiritual injury. And I feel like that reconciliation, and so far the research is telling us the reconciliation portion of that is coming to terms with this notion of forgiveness.
Wow. Forgiving themselves.
Yeah.
Well, it's the forgiving of self, and then it's the forgiving of where the order came from.
Okay.
Right?
And maybe the process as a whole.
Exactly.
I got you. Okay.
I have to forgive the entire organization. Wow. I have to forgive the individual. I have to forgive the person who was next to me. I have to forgive myself because we are now talking about guilt and we are talking about shame. And when you bring guilt and shame into the conversation, that is something that's psychology itself. And that's why in my work, it's the integration of psychology, of sociology, of anthropology, of spiritual studies, religion, theology. We all have to collaborate. And so that now becomes an issue of society.
So in your most recent study, what were some of your most interesting findings? And in this study in particular, were there any findings that jumped out at you?
Well, when we started this study, my colleagues and I have 3 other colleagues that work with me on this project. We knew that we would run up against, PTSD. We knew that we would come up against the difficulty finding that camaraderie where, the brotherhood or the sisterhood that I found in the military would be hard to find in civilian life. We knew, the depression and the emotional difficulties of reconnecting would be present. What we did not realize was that moral injury was really one of the key mediating factors. In other words, the higher the moral injury, the more difficult it would be to connect in civilian world. The higher the moral injury, the more difficult time a soldier or a veteran would have just finding someone to talk to. That's where isolation, that's where marginality comes in. That's where they feel as though they don't matter. So moral injury became a huge mediating factor out of this study.
So taking a step back, how would you fix the problem of the U.S. foreign policy more generally?
It's such a loaded question, and it's really one that I wrestle with every day. There's a program that's starting to gain some traction, and it's called Veterans Court. It's sort of like an accountability court, similar to drug court, where you put a person through these stages they go through to sort of rehabilitate them. And in a setting like Veterans Court, where you have accountability, having that accountability where you have a safe space to go so that you can at least share what's going on in your life, and you have to stand before someone who's holding you accountable, helps bring that process of moral injury to the surface. Another place that I have found that it's really impactful, here in Georgia, we do this program. It's called Just Listening. And all we do, we invite veterans from every walk of life, the different wars, branches of the military, and we invite the public. And it's not a group therapy setting. We sit and we learn how to listen to one another. We learn how to listen to the stories of these veterans, and we teach the community how to listen. Because a lot of times when we think about, a veteran or, a Vietnam vet, it's like, well, that person might, and I'll use the term very loosely, they might snap. And when they snap, they might do something that's very uncomfortable. Well, they are people. They are people who had very different experiences than we might have experienced from, where they came from. So having these places where they can share their stories, where the narrative of what they experienced can be held in a very sacred space. And I sort of juxtapose that with what happens in ancient times with warriors. When a warrior came home, the community welcomed the warrior. Mm-hmm. The community revered the warrior. The warrior would sit around and tell the stories of what it was like, and those stories were held in high esteem. A setting like Just Listening allows those stories to be cherished and valued. And a lot of times when soldiers and veterans walk away from a Just Listening session, they're like, wow, it was great to just say what I needed to say and not feel judged, not feel attacked, not feel as though it was not safe. So I think in even in treating PTSD and treating all of the other clinical pathologies that comes through a diagnosis like that, I think it's important to have a space where they can just share and not feel shame and not feel guilt.
So for those of us who have veteran family members, loved ones, friends even, sounds like a relatively not simple fix per se, but it doesn't require a degree to listen.
Mm-hmm. No, it does not. We don't need a degree to listen to someone, but we need to learn how to listen.
Absolutely.
And just let that story exist in that space.
Huh. So what's your next big project?
So this this particular study, it's done in two phases. So we did the quantitative side where we interviewed 230 veterans, and this notion of moral injury that emerges the mediating factor was key to the study. Step two is to go in and now do the narrative interviews where we sit and we ask questions based on their responses to the first part of the study, and we really document what the story is. Once those stories are documented, we are then able to analyze those stories and see what are the commonalities, what are the themes, what emerges from those stories, right? So this is really the work of qualitative psychology. This is going back to William James and to Bruner and to the story of the narrative. Even players like Maslow, they talk about these stories and the experience. Bruner says that people have the innate predisposition to narrative organization of their experiences, which means this predisposition, this innate way of being, it speaks to my identity, who I am as a person. And he says, Bruno also says that, through the narrative, it is central to being human and how we bring meaning and order to life. Well, if we can take these stories and first of all, hold them in high esteem and see how they speak to the identity of veterans, then we may have a way of finding meaning through their stories that we can take these stories and maybe teach them another way of being that's outside of the clinical world. So I feel like the next step of our project is to really get in there and sit with the veterans. And I think we may interview anywhere from 30 to 50 veterans from the different branches and really see what emerges from their stories.
Yeah, it sounds like a pretty straightforward fix. So, okay, last question, and then I'll let you go. Tomorrow, I make you the United States Secretary of Veteran Affairs. I say, David Shulkin, you're out of there. And I make you the Secretary of Veterans Affairs. How do you fix this? Like, what do you institute to fix this thing, the issue of PTSD in general? Because that seems to be the hot button issue of today, is that the veterans that we do have coming back from overseas have this giant, like, gorilla on their back. And we're just, we're throwing things against the wall to try to fix it. So what do you institute?
The first thing I would do is once they're discharged from the military, most of them go through a reintegration class, which might be a PowerPoint, how to write a resume, how to open a bank account. And those are some practical things that they need. Sure. But the one thing that I would do, I would for sure implement a space where they can sit, they can debrief either through journaling or just through talk therapy, where they can talk about their experiences, just to talk, just to speak, just to release those experiences and have someone or a body of people just listen.
That sounds like the most straightforward solution ever. Like I don't know. I thought it would be so much more intense. Like, we need a regimen of antipsychotics, and we also need lithium, and we need to put them on mushrooms, and we need to have them in a room by themselves for 6 weeks. They have to be outside of the city. They need no human contact for 24 hours. Like, I thought it would be something much more intense, but like just listening to them talk and tell their stories.
Question.
That seems like a fix. That's crazy.
Do you know if there's like almost like a buddy system set in place yet in VA for like on a voluntary basis?
So some VAs, they offer that, and that's really what a buddy does. A buddy is someone who say, hey, let's go grab coffee.
Yeah.
Right. So the space that I'm talking about could be in the form of a couch setting. We have a bunch of couches. We sit around and we talk. It could be a buddy system where, hey, listen, you're partnered with this person, and anything you need, if you just need to go sit and talk. This is the power of the accountability courts too. You have a buddy. You have someone who can help you through the process. Just hold your hand and let you know you're not alone.
Yeah.
William James says one of the worst injustices any human being can experience is the feeling of being ignored, feeling as though I do not matter. And mattering is a concept that I'm studying as part of how do we help heal moral injury. When I feel like I matter, when I feel like I can depend on you, when I feel like I'm important to you, when I feel like I can be heard, that takes me a long way. That brings reconciliation, that brings closeness, that brings connectivity. So creating that space where they can feel like they matter again, where they are a human being, that they can be meaningful, contributing members of society. I think that's where I would spend my time focusing on how to bring about that change.
Gosh, I wish that there was an outlet. Like, I hate the fact that they do have to keep that in. Like, I think that each situation that they're in is so unique that there is no one-size-fits-all solution for any of them. And this does account for them being able to tell their individual story, because some of them will come back home and it's like, I cannot deal with like the feelings I have inside, this moral conundrum where it's like I was in this devastating place where I saw like people die around me. Like there's a soldier that I work with. He's a field supervisor. He comes down and he was telling me how like he was in Iraq and they would take pot shots at him from the hill. And then he just went on with the story. He was like, yeah, sometimes like you hear the crack and it's just people taking pot shots from the hill. But it's really just the heat out there that really bothers. And I'm like, whoa, wait. Like when you say pot shot, what do you mean? He's like, oh yeah, they'll like shoot at you. Like from a distance. They probably can't hear you just because they're so far away and they're not good shots. But they'll shoot at you and you hear the bullets go past or whatever. You just kind of get out of the way. And I'm like, what?
Yeah, like to us, that's the most devastating thing in the world. To him, there wasn't any coffee that day.
Yeah. God dang it, there's no coffee there. And then he was like coming back home, reintegrating. Like the thing that even he was a Marine. The thing he noticed is that civilian life is just so slow.
Yeah.
And people are so petty. Like the things that we sweat on a day-to-day basis is like, this is unbearably monotonous to them. So we'll be like, oh my God, I'm 5 minutes late to work. Like, I can't believe we're sweating bullets from, we're in traffic and we're like super uncomfortable. And like, they can't even fathom this being a thing. Like like,
first of all, don't be late.
Yeah, first of all, Marine's probably not going to be late. But like just being stuck in traffic does not matter to them.
Yeah,
like this is
so much as the incessant honking and and the people around them freaking out over the traffic
and like, so close to you.
Nothing matches up for the norms that they had established for themselves. Mm-hmm. Like nothing in this society matches up. The traffic is no big deal, except the people are freaking out. Where it comes from, the bullets are no big deal. So if the new guy comes in freaking out and like ducking for cover, like stand up, you look like a woman in traffic.
And then you also hear the small jolts of stress that you get in a day. That's devastating for your health. Like, you know how like something happens and it scares you a bit. Like when someone, if you're in a store and someone sprints past you really close to you, it would jolt you like, oh man, what's happening?
Your heart goes up a little bit.
Right. So imagine a soldier, he's in traffic and then like he looks over and the person next to him is reaching for something. And it's like, like he's used to being in a Humvee. There's nothing around him. But like when someone moves too quickly, it's like, oh, that's okay. Something's happening. I have to know what's going on. React. But now you're in New York City's traffic. Now everybody's reaching for something.
I don't know why I was only thinking about like, for some reason I feature a lot. All Marines are cowboys.
They're all in Texas.
So if that Texas, they're like in the Midwest or something. They all go back to their farms. I'm awful. What is that mental picture?
I have no idea. It's spoken like a true Texan though.
So when all our boys come home and I'm not thinking they go back to New York. Like, that's not their problem.
Well, obviously they're going back to Austin and Dallas. That's where all of the soldiers come from. That's hilarious.
Sure. All the best ones. I'm just kidding.
Go to polypsych.org where you can sign up for the Academic Social Network. Subscribe on iTunes. When you sign up on polypsych.org, I'll get your email and then I can converse back and forth with you and we can set up a interview time with you. So if you are a really cool entrepreneur, you got some product that's like dope that we really should talk about, like that thing on Avaya. When I talked to Avaya the other day, oh, it's amazing. He was telling me about the 911 system and how it's just broken.
Yeah, go check that one out.
Yeah,
listen.
that's like my favorite podcast. Fun. So like if you have some cool product or something, or if you're a professor and you have some really cool research, most of our interviews are with professors, but
or student
and students as well. We just had one with Kira. We had one with Kira who was talking about traumatic brain injuries because she's doing her senior research proposal, I believe, senior research assignment on CTE. So we talked about like the NFL, the culture of it, whatever. Anyway,
cool.
So create a profile on polypsych.org and then set up a meeting time with me. Shoot me an email. You can find my email on polypsych.org under the About section.
Real quick, if we got any listeners who are veterans or currently active serving members of our military, thank you for your service.
Cheers. Also, come and talk to us because I would for sure like to hear some cool stories.
Yeah, come talk to us.
Yeah, you guys got some weird stories.
They may be cool. They might be completely normal.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, they may be normal, but probably not. All right, later.